This podcast is a work of historical interpretation. While we strive for accuracy, some aspects of history are open to interpretation and debate. Thank you for listening. Let's go, just because I don't know what's going on with my Chromebook. The fact, maybe it just needs a restart. I don't restart it very often, so it might just want to be rebooted.
Oh boy.
I'm hoping, because I can't find my little doohickey thing for my mouse. It's somewhere here. And the mouse is starting not to work very well. It's about 4 years old, which is pretty long in computer. Welcome to Time Tellers, where we delve into history's most pivotal moments. Today, we're taking you inside of one of America's history's most significant prison uprising, the Attica Prison Riot of 1971. So with the exception of the balloon episode, I think this is one of our more recent episodes. I believe. So this episode title is Attica Uprising, the fight for justice behind bars. It was a violent and tragic event that exposed the deep flaws in the U.S. prison system. Over 5 days, inmates took control of the prison, making demands for better conditions and fundamental human rights while the nation watched in shock. But what led to such a desperate rebellion? And how did it reshape the prison system? Join us as we uncover the events leading to the uprising, the riot, the key players, and its bloody aftermath. You don't want to sing your song?
Which one?
What were you singing earlier? I don't remember.
I was singing.
No, I guess you weren't singing. We were just talking.
I was going to say, I don't sing.
That's false. I've heard you sing.
When? Where?
There's probably audio of it. Okay, let's get back to real serious
Were you
stuff
listening to all 300 and something songs from last year? Because you would have heard stuff in one.
Proof. There we go.
Yeah, we'll figure out which one it was. Go listen to all of them.
Okay.
In order.
In order.
Without a bathroom break.
Well, that's not possible for me. Let's talk about the Attica Correctional Facility, located in Attica, New York. Was known for its harsh conditions long before the 1971 uprising. The prison, built in 1930, housed about 2,250 inmates. It was designed to hold about 1,200 inmates, nearly 40% more than its capacity. And the majority of inmates were Black and Latino men, while the prison staff was almost entirely white. This, of course, created a tense racial divide. Several factors contributed to the rising tensions. There was brutal living conditions. Inmates faced overcrowding, poor sanitation, and brutal treatment from the guards. For example, they received only one roll of toilet paper monthly, minimal medical care, and just 56 cents a day for prison labor. Food was substandard, showers were limited to once a week, and recreational activities were severely restricted. These conditions led to constant frustrations among the inmates, who were treated more like cattle than human beings. Inmates at Attica Correctional Facility had limited outside time, but it was heavily restricted. They were typically allowed a short recreational period in the yard, but only once a day. This time was often cut short or canceled altogether due to staff shortages or security concerns. From now on, when I fumble words, I'm just going to force my way through it because...
Good, because I don't have that much time in the day to edit.
Oh my, sometimes I cannot read my own writing. And this is typed. There was a lack of rehabilitation programs at the prison, and few opportunities for educational, vocational training, or the rehabilitation itself, making it difficult for prisoners to gain skills that would help them reintegrate into society after release. The facility offered some basic literacy and GED classes, which were insufficient for the large inmate population. The limited availability and lack of quality instruction made it difficult for inmates to benefit. A few vocational programs included sewing, metalworking, and furniture assembly training. Still, they were outdated and not geared toward helping inmates gain valuable skills for employment upon release. There was virtually no counseling services or drug treatment programs, even though many inmates struggled with mental health issues and substance abuse problems. Inmates could attend religious services, but these were also limited with few opportunities for meaningful spiritual guidance. Growing activism in prisons. Civil rights activism marked the late 1960s and the early 70s, and this spirit of resistance spread to prisons. Influential groups like the Black Panthers and activists like George Jackson, inmates increasingly demanded better treatment, education, and fair pay for prison labor. Martin Luther King Jr. was an outspoken advocate for criminal justice reform and often addressed the systematic racism within the prison system. In his letter from Birmingham jail, written in 1963, he highlighted the broader injustices of the system and the need for humane treatment of inmates. It's good for people to have people like MLK Jr. on their side. That is usually a attention grabber, like for the public. I mean. What are you doing?
Nothing.
Okay.
Stuff.
You are also supposed to contribute to these podcasts.
I am contributing.
Okay. Co-founder of the Black Panther Party, Bobby Seale, also advocated for prisoner rights and criticized the dehumanizing conditions in U.S. prisons. The Panthers focused on prisoner issues, including advocating for better conditions and fair trials, brought more mainstream awareness to prison reform. Then there was Tom Wicker, who was a prominent journalist for the New York Times, and he was also a vocal critic of the U.S. prison system conditions before Attica. After the riot, he was invited to negotiate with inmates during the standoff, reflecting his involvement in the movement for prison reform. Okay, one of the events that kicked off or started or was a cause of the riots was the death of George Jackson. On August 21st, 1971, George Jackson, a prominent Black Panther and prison activist, was killed during an attempted escape from San Quentin State Prison in California. Jackson, who had been serving an indeterminate sentence for a $70 robbery, became a leading voice for prison reform and racial justice while incarcerated, which probably did not help lower that indeterminate sentence. I'm guessing.
Probably not.
No. His writings, particularly in Soledad Brother, exposed the brutal realities of prison life and inspired many inmates, making him a symbol of resistance against the systematic oppression. Do they still have indeterminate sentencing?
Not in this country.
I was going to say, I want to say that England does. It's like, they call it like I could be wrong, but I know they definitely did have at His Majesty's decision. That's not what they call it though. Like it's basically up to the monarchy, but I don't know if that's still a thing or not.
Yeah.
Especially since the monarchy isn't powerful like it used to be.
Monarchy, what'd you say, anarchy?
Is that singing?
Sorry, I can't rap in French.
During the
I'm not Lafayette.
During the escape attempt, Jackson allegedly received a smuggled gun, took hostages, and tried to flee, resulting in a violent clash that left 6 people dead, including Jackson himself. His death was highly controversial, with official accounts claiming he was shot while trying to escape, while supporters argued that it was a state-sanctioned assassination due to his growing influence. Jackson's death occurred just 3 weeks before the Attica Prison Uprising. And it intensified inmate anger across the country, becoming a rallying point for all those demanding justice and reform within the U.S. prison system. By early September 1971, the prisoners at Attica were at a breaking point. They began to organize secretly, discussing ways to make their demands known. So the uprising took place during September 9th through the 13th in 1971. It began on September 9th when a minor altercation between an inmate and a guard escalated quickly. Around 1,200 inmates took control of D Yard, the central recreation yard, along with 39 hostages, mostly correctional officers and a few civilian workers. Imagine being a civilian worker and, well, either. Oh my, that would be terrifying.
Yeah.
Inmates set up a leadership council led by figures like Elliot L.D. Barkley, a 21-year-old charismatic activist who emerged as a key spokesperson. The inmates demanded better living conditions, educational opportunities, medical care, religious freedom, and amnesty for actions taken during the uprising. At the start of the Attica Prison Riot, inmates primarily used improvised weapons they created on the spot, including using available materials within the facility. Initially, inmates grabbed whatever they could find in the chaos. This included shivs and knives, which they made from kitchen utensils, workshop tools, and other metal objects. These were fashioned rapidly once the riot began, or I'm sure some were brought out from hiding spots. I would think. Maybe. Possibly. Objects like broom handles, broken furniture, and pipes were picked up or broken off to create makeshift clubs. As the riot unfolded, inmates gathered bricks, rocks, and heavy objects from construction areas and parts of the prison to use as both defensive or offensive weapons. As the riot continued, inmates managed to become more organized, creating additional weapons and reinforcing their defense of the D Yard. So although the initial weapons were primarily improvised, inmates continued to create, refine, and enhance their arsenal throughout the 4-day standoff, using any materials they could find to strengthen their position. Negotiations began on September 10th with a mix of officials, negotiators, and activists, including Tom Wicker, the journalist from the New York Times, and William Kunstler, a civil rights attorney. The inmates presented a list of 28 demands to state officials, emphasizing their rights as human beings and asking for an investigation into the conditions that led to the uprising. I'm not going to list all 28 demands because we don't want to be here for 5 hours. But some of those demands were, again, the complete amnesty. I guess you got to try. Inmates demanded full amnesty for participating in the uprising, seeking to avoid retaliation and further legal consequences for the rebellion. They called for better and more accessible medical treatment, addressing issues like inadequate care, delayed treatment, and just the basic lack of medical staff. The inmates wanted basic improvements such as adequate toilet paper, more showers, and overall better sanitation to ensure humane living conditions. They were also asking for minimum wage rather than the paltry 56 cents per day. Inmates sought the right to practice their religions freely, including allowing prisoners to observe religious holidays and rituals without interference. They requested better access to education and vocational training that would be more relevant to the world outside the prison and to help them, and rehabilitation programs that would also help them reintegrate into society. The demands also included changes to the parole system, advocating for fairer and more transparent procedures to provide inmates with a better chance at earning parole. Seems like a legit, not that the toilet paper one issue isn't, or the showers, but not knowing, like, you need some transparency so you know what to do.
Yeah.
Like, how to go about it. Like, Prisoners called for measures to end racial discrimination within the prison, particularly in staff treatment, disciplinary action, and work assignments. They also demanded improvements in the quality and quantity of food, which had been a primary source of discontent. Because when you're hungry, you're not thinking about much of anything else.
What about the winter of my discontent?
If you're hungry, that is your main concern.
Okay. Am I ordering pizza?
The inmates wanted improved communication rights, including more access to family visits and unrestricted correspondence through mail. The state, led by Governor Nelson Rockefeller, resisted most of the demands, only agreeing to a few of them. The most contentious was, of course, amnesty for rioting inmates. On the morning of September 13th, after negotiations broke down, Governor Rockefeller ordered armed state troopers and correction officers to retake the prison by force. The assault was brutal, involving the use of tear gas, rifles, shotguns, and even helicopters, which dropped tear gas into the yard. Within 15 minutes, the armed forces had regained control of the prison, but the aftermath was horrific. 29 inmates and 10 hostages were killed, most by state trooper gunfire. Dozens more were injured. The retaking was chaotic, with prisoners being beaten, stripped, and tortured for hours after the assault. Feeling a little revenge going on there, vengeance going on. What?
I don't think that was much vengeance.
I'm saying that's probably... There wasn't a lot of restraint being used at that point. Probably on either side.
Yeah.
The aftermath of the Attica Uprising was filled with both tragedy and political fallout. Again, 29 inmates and 10 hostages were killed. Over 89 inmates were seriously wounded, many of whom were denied immediate medical care. Several hostages died not from inmate violence, but from friendly fire. The Attica Uprising forced officials to acknowledge the deplorable prison condition. Some reforms were implemented, such as improved medical care, access to showers, and increased family visitation rights. They also were able to get limited educational opportunities. However, broader demands for prisoner rights and systematic change were largely ignored, and many underlying issues persisted. Public outrage grew as details emerged about the state's handling of the retaking. Reports of torture, beatings, and cover-ups further damaged the credibility of the state government and prison system. Several investigations were launched, including the McKay Commission, which criticized the state's response and highlighted the need for systematic prison reform. Specifically, the report released in 1972, following the uprising, detailed severe issues within the facility, including the overcrowding, the poor living conditions, and inadequate medical care. It highlighted the significant racial tensions between the predominantly Black and Latino inmate population and the mostly white correctional staff, which did not help the situation. The report criticized the violent response during the retaking of the prisons, which resulted in the multiple deaths. It called for reforms such as reducing overcrowding, expanding educational and vocational programs, and trying to promote racial equity within the prison system. The report remains a critical document advocating for humane treatment and systematic changes to U.S. prisons today. Over the next few decades, there was increased advocacy for inmates' legal rights, mental health care, and reduction of overcrowding. However, the tough-on-crime policies of the 1980s and 1990s led to mass incarcerations and often reversed the progress made after Attica. I have some numbers here. You'll be happy to know.
Oh boy. Numbers?
Numbers. In 1972, the prison population was approximately 200,000, which seems incredibly low. And you'll see why. 1980, the number of inmates rose to 329,000. The prison population in 1990 reached 627,000. And in 2000, the numbers peaked at 1.4 million.
That's it?
This is 2000, so this is 20-some years ago. I'm actually not sure about today's numbers. But it's up there.
Probably double.
Yeah. But just from 1972, went from 200,000 to 2000, 1.4 million. The dramatic rise is attributed to policies such as mandatory minimum sentencing, 3-strike laws, and the war on drugs, which collectively contributed to mass incarceration crisis. Some key figures that can be remembered from the Attica Uprising would be Elliot Barkley, the young inmate leader who became a symbol of the fight. He has a speech where he declared, "We are men, we are not beasts, and do not intend to be beaten or driven as such." Nelson Rockefeller was the governor during the Attica Prison Uprising. He was criticized for the handling of the crisis. Ironically, he later championed harsh drug laws in the 1970s, known as the Rockefeller drug laws, which imposed long sentences for drug offenses and fueled more mass incarceration. We have Nixon. We were talking about Nixon now. President Nixon.
I don't want to hear you talking about Dick.
Oh, my God.
It's inappropriate. This is a family podcast.
Notice how I said Nixon, and you decided to shorten his first name, so who's inappropriate?
What was his nickname?
We're not going there. As president in the 1970s, Nixon declared the war on drugs, framing drug abuse as public enemy number one.
Better go beat up that weed.
I wonder if it will resist. His administration introduced policies that led to longer sentences, especially for drug-related offenses, setting the foundation for the tough-on-crime era. Then there was Ronald Reagan in the 80s, who intensified the war on drugs and increased funding for drug enforcement and implementing mandatory minimum sentences for drug offenses. This is also where DARE started, like in the late 80s. I mean, I remember DARE, so. As president in the 90s, Clinton supported and signed the Violent Crime Control and Law Enforcement Act of 1994, which included 3-strike laws. And Joe Biden, as senator, played a crucial role in drafting and promoting the 1994 crime bill. Angela Davis was a prominent activist and scholar. Davis advocated for prison reform and abolition, critiquing the rising incarceration rates and systematic racism of the prison industrial complex, which is probably around the time where that term became known or used. Maybe she's the one to have started that term. I'm not sure.
Possible.
Michelle Alexander was a civil rights lawyer and the author of The New Jim Crow. Alexander brought attention to the impacts of mass incarceration, especially on Black Americans, highlighting the enduring legacy of the tough-on-crime era. I do have 2 survivors' quotes. Tyrone Larkin, a survivor of the 1971 prison uprising, said when recounting the oppressive conditions, "We were treated like animals. The overcrowding, the beatings, the lack of medical care. We couldn't take it anymore." One of the hostages, corrections officer Michael S. Smith, also recounted his experience. "We were taken hostage, and for the next 4 days, we were in constant fear for our lives. The inmates were in control, and we had no idea what would happen next." The Attica Prison Riot remains one of the most critical events in U.S. prison history, symbolizing the need for reform, racial justice, and human rights within the system. It exposed the violent nature of prison administration and law enforcement, while also highlighting the inmates' desperate call for basic human dignity. Attica remains a powerful symbol in the modern world, referenced in various contexts related to prison reform, civil rights, and resistance against systematic oppression. Organizations like the American Civil Liberties Union, the ACLU, and Equal Justice Initiative EJI reference Attica in their campaigns for prison reform and humane treatment of incarcerated people even today. In the 1975 film Dog Day Afternoon, great film, love that movie, Al Pacino's character famously chants, what did he chant? What did he chant? Go ahead, this is what you were doing earlier.
Which one the hell? No, we won't go.
No, oh, you were saying that. No, I was just thinking Attica.
Attica, all or nothing.
Yeah. During a bank robbery scene to evoke police brutality and... to evoke the memory of police brutality in the Attica massacre. Hip-hop artists such as Nas and Public Enemy have referenced Attica in their lyrics, using it as a metaphor for resistance and struggles of Black communities against oppressive systems. There is the book Blood in the Water, The Attica Prison Uprising in 1971 and Its Legacy by Heather Ann Thompson, which has revived interest in the Attica riot, sparking discussions about implications on the criminal justice system. The documentary, known simply as Attica, which was released in 2021 on Showtime, helped provide more profound insight into the uprising, educating new generations about its historical significance and enduring relevance. The Attica Uprising wasn't just a prison riot, but a fight for humanity, equality, and dignity in one of the most oppressive systems of the time. The echoes of the uprising still resonate today as debates about prison reform, racial justice, and human rights continue. That's all for this episode of Time Tellers. If you found this story compelling, please give us another listen. Share us on your social media. Check in with us on social media. Leave a review. And join us again the next time on Tuesdays and occasionally other days as we explore other pivotal historical moments in our country's history. Not all of it is good, but all of it is important.
Is it?
I think it is.
It's not all about yarn.
It is not about yarn. Nothing I said today was about yarn. You brought up yarn.
I asked about my squawk earlier.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Well, I'm sorry. You will not get your squonk by your birthday. I'm sorry.
But what do I get for my birthday?
A happy birthday.
I want more than that.
No. That's all my kids get. No, I'm just kidding.
No wonder they hate you.
Oh. Well, that was below the belt.
Are you wearing a belt?
No, I am not, actually.
So therefore it wasn't.
Okay.
I win.
Fair.
As usual.
Okay, well, we have to go because the band is almost here and we have rehearsal. And you just told our drummer to be quiet via text message, so we might have to smooth over some, dear. Oh, dear. I noticed he did get quiet, though. But anyways, thank you for joining us, and we will be glad to have you listen to us next time. Bye!